Hi, everybody, and welcome to Ask a NaviGuide, part of the Abundant Aging podcast series. I'm Mike, your host, and on this show, we tackle subjects in aging and family caregiving that can be stressful to work through. And we do this with tips and advice from the United Church Homes NaviGuide team. Our NaviGuides have decades of experience helping families work through these issues, and we want to help everyone, everywhere, age with abundance. Today, we're here with Robin, who will help us understand insurance benefits, and more specifically, insurance benefits where you or a loved one may be in the hospital, and try to understand when you're in that situation how to navigate those insurance benefits. And hopefully, our advice will help you out and lower some stress. So, Robin, I don't know, do you want to give yourself a quick introduction?
Sure. Hello. Thank you for having me. So, I have about 20 years experience working in the senior health field. That would include long-term care insurance, Medicare Advantage, Medicare supplements, life insurance, that type of thing. I have a couple years of experience in claims, as well as I was a billing manager for home health care for about 5 years before becoming a NaviGuide. So I do like to use my experience to really. I know insurance can be very overwhelming, especially for seniors moving from the employer, retiring, and then going into Medicare. So this is what I love to do.
That's awesome. Well, thank you so much for being with us. And by the way, I want to do a future podcast on long-term care insurance because
Oh,
that's an interesting subject. So, look, we know it can be really stressful on families when a loved one has to go into the hospital, and even more stressful if that
mhm.
hospitalization's unplanned, and one day turns into another day may turn into even weeks, and that's pretty hard. And
Yes.
we all know about those horror stories about people that they rack up millions of dollars and in health insurance or health care costs and all the rest of it. So it can be really unsettling, is what I'm saying. Is when you're there,
Mhm.
you're dealing with your loved one. You don't know how or when they're going to get better, and then you're thinking about insurance. So today I'd love to see if you can walk us through a process or some ideas that families can use to better understand what insurance covers and what they may have to cover so they can be better prepared, and maybe we can give them some peace of mind. Okay, so are you ready to get into it?
I'm ready.
Okay. All right, question number one. What are some of the important things you should understand if you have, say, an unexpected hospital? So let's say this starts out with an ER visit, right? Something happens, I'm in the
Okay.
ER visit. I guess, what are some things maybe to either have ready or to know that you would have to provide as part of the intake
Okay.
process?
Certainly, you want to make sure you have all your insurance cards with you. That usually happens, but having a list of your medications is very important. Oftentimes, even here locally, we have two large hospital networks, and you're usually either in one or the other. All your doctors might be in that network, but you'd be surprised if you go to the hospital in that network that they might not necessarily have the most recent list of your medications. So whether you have a list handy, whether you have all of your bottles in a great big gallon bag, however you need to do that, that's very important. So those are the main things. One thing I recommend is you can actually go on, it's called Life Alert, and it's a red magnet that you can put on your refrigerator. And most first responders are trained to look for those if they have to come to your home to take you to the hospital. On that, you would have your demographic information, your insurance information. There's a spot for your medications. Or what I typically recommend is normally when you leave your doctor's office, they almost always give you a list of your medications. You can just fold that up, put it in there. That way they know how old it is. And that's what I recommend. Or if you're just driving to the ER, you can just simply grab that and you would have everything that you would need.
Wow, it's almost like I mean, this is just part of emergency preparedness, right? It's like having, like, if you live in an
Yes.
area where they have tornadoes or things like that, you sort of have a grab and
Mhm.
go bag. I mean, this life alert or another
Yep.
similar, yeah, grab and go. That's and first, sorry,
Mhm.
first responders are trained to look for this.
Yes, I know in my area they are. Yes, it's a magnet that goes on your refrigerator. We also put a sticker right outside their door if they live in an apartment complex, so they also know to look for that. Mhm.
Oh, that's terrific. That's terrific advice. And, if you don't have this list, I mean, I've heard stories about people, usually, they go to the hospital. The hospital has their own kind of pharmacy in the building, right? And if you have a condition, they may
Mhm.
prescribe you the very same medication that you have at home, or they may, because they're not necessarily, one network may not talk to another, or they just may be covering their bases and making sure you have those meds on the way back, right? But they may just be
Mhm.
duplicates or different doses or things like that, and that can kind of really mess things up, right?
And real quick, I need to make a correction. That's actually called a file of life magnet, not life alert. I do apologize. It's a file of life magnet.
File of life magnet. Okay. All right. Free advertising. So, how does your insurance even know that you're in the hospital, and how would it start organizing what you pay for and what they pay for?
Really, that won't happen until after the fact, until the claim comes. So, if you have a planned visit, of course, they're going to do prior authorization. They're going to make sure that you're covered. But when you go to the ER, hopefully you already know that hospital network is in your network and that sort of thing. But really, they won't be notified until they get a claim.
Got it. Okay, but if it is a planned hospital, like I'm going to go in for, a planned surgery or something like that,
Mhm.
you're still going to bring your medication list, right? You're
Oh,
still going to
yes.
bring your insurance
Mhm.
card and all that, but then the hospital will likely probably call your insurance provider to make sure that they're in network, that there may be an understand. So in that situation, I mean, would you, if you want to understand maybe what you would be responsible for and the insurance company would be responsible for, if it's a planned hospitalization, would you be calling the insurance company or would you call the hospital billing department just to get maybe a ballpark of what your responsibility is?
I don't know that you can get a ballpark, but you could certainly call the hospital's billing department and ask, who are all the providers that are going to be performing my surgery? And then you can call your insurance company and say, "This is who will be there. This is what I'm having done." Let's say it's a hip replacement, a knee replacement. Is there anything you foresee that has not been done yet? Is there any extra prior authorization guidelines that I have? If I need therapy afterward, is there anything that I need to know ahead of time to prepare for that? If I have to go to a skilled nursing extended care rehab stay, is there anything I should know about that? So those are the things that you should try to do to prepare ahead of time.
So let's talk about what happens, like from the hospital perspective, when you are admitted, what planned or not. Well, let's say it's unplanned. Okay. So how
Okay.
would the hospital? What would they do during a stay, or how would they begin to understand your insurance information? What might they ask you, or maybe your loved one, or your caregiver, or caretaker, or whatever? However you, what would they be required to provide? I guess I don't know what's normal and what's not normal. Like when let's say I'm my spouse is in the hospital. I
Mhm.
can't even think about insurance situation, but they're asking me about these things. What's normal for them to ask and what's not normal for them to ask?
Okay. So the only person that might have an inkling would be the case manager. And this would be once you know that you're going to be discharged. And to be honest, I don't think they know much more than making sure that you go someplace that's in network.
Okay.
So they may come in and they're going to say your loved one is doing better, but they're to the point where we've done all that we can do for them here because really hospitalization is just getting the person stable and then they need to go somewhere else. That's what a hospital is. A lot of people don't realize that. They're like, why can't they just stay here? You guys, are doing a great job. They can be looked after. But a hospital is really just for that short term stay. So whether it's going to an extended care facility or home health care, it's time to move on to that next level of care. So they may come to you and say, "Do you have a preference on what facility that you go to for your therapy?" Normally, the difference is on whether you can go home or not is normally when you're in a nursing home, you're getting therapy every single day, sometimes a couple times a day. When you get to the point where you only need it 2 or 3 times a week, then you're appropriate for home health care Part A therapy.
Mhm.
So it's all a big continuing therapy as you're improving and you just need it less and less. So you may need to have a couple of areas in mind as there are some facilities that are close to your home or close to your work or whatever is going to make it most convenient, as well as being a network. They might be full. A lot of extended rehab sites have just a very, few beds, anywhere from 5 to maybe 20, because they're there mostly for the long-term care patients or memory care. So you might need to have a couple of those in mind. Some of those may choose not to be in network with Medicare Advantage plans. That does happen because filing claims is a little different with those than it is with Medicare. So, that can be very overwhelming if someone's coming to you and saying, "Here's a list of places. Which one of these do you want he or she to go to?" And that is what happens. They are not allowed to make recommendations.
It's the patient's choice or it's your choice. Okay.
Yes.
So if I have to make a decision for a loved one in the hospital, I should expect that, I guess, on the intake, they're going to be asking me for the insurance information.
Mhm.
They would also ask for things like advanced directives, right?
Yes.
Okay. So it's common to ask for an advance. And an advanced directive is what?
An advanced directive, it could be several things, but in this particular case, a lot of times it's, do you want to be resuscitated should that event arise. And what that means is people a lot of times think that you might just be passed out, but still breathing and everything. And they're asking you, do you want someone to help you? And that's not what that means. That means that if they come into your room, you have no heartbeat and you are not breathing, what do you want them to do? So that's very important to understand that. Also, you're living well.
Yeah, and it also so it's a living will, right? So let's say my wife's in the hospital. Would the advance directive also say, "This is my husband, and he can make certain types of medical decisions for me if I can't make them for myself?"
Yes. Well, typically your living will is going to pretty much lay out what it is you want, but that gives him the ability to legally sign the paperwork saying this is what you want. So, I mean, obviously, if people don't have that or if they don't have a very detailed one, yes, it also gives that person the right to make those decisions. But hopefully, if you did a living will, you have it laid out exactly the way you want it.
Yeah, and I think we may, living wills and advance directives may be something that we want to cover on a future podcast, Robin, because I think that's important for people to understand. Because I don't think I mean, just having a living will or having an advance directive, I mean, not everybody has those, right? You have to set that up yourself.
They do not.
Okay. All right. So different set. We'll cover that on a future podcast. But let's go back to case managers. So if I'm in the hospital, there's just in that first stop on the road to recovery or whatever we want to call it, there's going to be a case manager there, and that case manager is really looking at my loved one and saying, he, she, they need to stay here for longer because they're not stabilized. Once they are stable, that person will move. They could move to a skilled nursing facility or similar, where if they deem that they can't go home, they need daily therapy or things like that. So you're teaching me so well. This is awesome. And then if they say, oh, well, they can actually go home and maybe they need services a couple times a week, then that's home health. And the case manager will, they'll present you a list with facilities that are in their network. And then they're also going to check for availability of a bed or a place, or if you're talking about a skilled nursing facility, right?
Well, they'll give you a list, but they won't necessarily know if they're in network until you pick one. And that's why you need to have a couple in mind. So you'll say, how about this one? I think I've heard of this one before, and maybe this one. Then they will call them and say, this is the resident that, or this is the patient that we have. This is what their needs are. This is what their insurance is. And then they'll find out if they're in network or not.
Got it. Okay. So, so they'll give you a list of these
Mhm.
facilities, and then you might want to check them out, right? And what are some steps that you should take to check out, let's say, a skilled nursing facility to know if it's a good one or not?
You can go on Medicare.gov, and there is a list and there's a star rating for these types of places. Unfortunately, it's not in real time. So it could
Hmm.
have been, usually it's at least 90 days old. So maybe that there was some issues that they had. They worked on those. There's been a plan of correction. So, you do have to take that with a grain of salt. I tell my residents that I work with that none of them are going to have good food. what you want to what you want to look for is what type of therapy department do they have? That's why it's important to have a good support system. You still want family to come in there to provide you with some snacks, some things that are going to be like home, but you're really not wanting to look at, obviously you want it to be clean, but a lot of times the newer places are not the places to go. This is kind of my philosophy on what I've seen is you might have a brand new beautiful nursing home, but they've hired everybody that everybody else has let go. So it might take a couple years to get a good strong staff, to get good strong medical professionals. So the one that has been there for a long time, that has not had a lot of turnover, that has a great therapy department, that's mainly what you want to look for.
That's the Goldilocks kind of,
Yes.
and look, you're going online, you're going to Medicare.gov, you're looking up the facility. They have these star
Mhm.
ratings, which I guess that they're based on things like, do people go back to the hospital too often from this facility? Do they have infections?
Right.
Do they have things like that? And
Yep.
I mean, there's no harm in actually calling the facility up and just sort of saying, "Hey, I noticed that this or that is an issue here. Can you speak to
Mhm.
that?" And I guess a good facility will say, "Oh yeah, well, we're dealing with this," or right. I mean,
Yeah.
they'll meet you where you are. Okay.
Yeah, they should be transparent, they should.
Oh man, we always sort of tangent. Well, I tangent on these topics when we do these discussion, Robins, but it's all just great information.
Well, and
Okay.
another thing that you were starting to see pop up, and I know we have NaviGuide, but there are a lot of other you're starting to see that more and more, where the hospitals might have a third party come in because either their case managers are overloaded or because they simply aren't as knowledgeable. But
Hmm.
there are, a lot of them are called care coordinators, care navigides, or navigation. So it's all kind of the same thing. But we are more trained.
But we're called NaviGuide. Okay, okay. We'll give the plug later. But important question. Then we're going to close this one out. So, the insurance itself. I know that if I have an employer-based insurance, I would have maybe, depending on my plan, I would have what they call a deductible, where I would have to cover
Mhm.
a certain amount of cost before the insurance covers the cost, and then I have an out-of-pocket maximum, right?
Yes.
So let's say that I'm in the hospital for like my loved one's been in the hospital for a week, and I'm starting to get anxious because I know that that I've had to pay copays before, I've had to pay bills before, I've had this experience of maybe I had a surgery before, and suddenly I get the doctor bill and the anesthesia bill and things like that, and that's all like, oh my goodness, what's happening here? But can you talk a little bit about how, let's say if we're talking about a medical event that may be significantly expensive for, and that's what insurance is for. Insurance is for them to. How does that work in terms of understanding my deductible and my out of pocket maximum and what I'm responsible for and what the insurance company is responsible for?
Well, hopefully that all had that conversation when you first met with your broker. So you at least have an idea. If you're in a PPO network, I would say a common maximum out of pocket is around $3,400, maybe between $3,400 and
And
$6,000.
we're talking about here 2023, February 3rd, 2023, in or around. Okay.
Now, granted, if you're out of network, that could be more, but hopefully you will have an idea of that. And also keep in mind, you won't see those claims for a while. Not only do they have to be processed, they have to go through their network to be discounted before it's ever sent to you. And there's going to be some of that written off. So it's going to be a while before you have that. And, they set up payment plans, they work with you. So they don't expect payments as soon as they send you the bill.
So let's say, so I'm in the hospital. I've been there for a month. I'm just going to make up an extreme. And let's say I'm in the hospital in December. Okay. I've been in there for a month and I'm going to be in the hospital for January and I've been there another month. The
Mhm.
maximum amount that I'm personally responsible for is going to be the out of my pocket maximum spending level, right? So if it's $3,500, then, and if I haven't met that, let's say I haven't done anything in December health wise. So in December, I pay 3,500 bucks or 3,600 or 4,000 or whatever it is. In January, I pay 3,600, 30, whatever it is, $4,000, and that's it. And the insurance company pays up the rest of the benefits that are covered under my insurance plan, right?
That's a tricky question because if you look at your summary of benefits, it could say that you're just responsible for the first 5 days, not necessarily the fact that you're in one benefit period versus another. So, and also too, if you took, most people's effective date is January 1st because of the annual open enrollment, but not necessarily. So your effective date could be from the time that you actually signed up for that program. So there's a lot of questions there.
So if I'm taking care of a loved one in the hospital, I'm calling up the insurance company and I'm saying, hey, what's
Yes.
my responsibility here, right? And they'll lay it all out for you, right?
And if it's traditional Medicare, they actually their benefit period is for 60 days. It's every 60 days. So it
Okay.
wouldn't matter if you were in December and January over that change of years.
Oh, so it's rolling 60 days. So it wouldn't. Okay. Well, gosh, it just gets it just gets more and more complex when you get deeper and deeper into it. But your loved one's in the hospital. Call up the insurance company. Explain the situation. Don't be shy. You don't want surprises. Have them lay out what you're responsible for and what the plan's responsible for. Okay.
Right.
All right. Well, look, we have to wrap it up for this one. This has been just fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing your knowledge, Robin. And again, we may be covering this on a future podcast. If you, the listener, have questions or have a subject that we should cover, please send that to us on our podcast site. And if you want more information about the UCH NaviGuide program, please visit www.uchnaviguide.org. And for more information about United Church Homes, please visit www.unitedchurchhomes.org. There is probably a podcast URL that I'm trying to remember. I think it's UCH Abundant Aging or abundantagingpodcast.com. But you know what? We're going to put it in the show notes. If you're finding us, you're going to have a link to it. So thank you very much for listening this time, and we'll see you on the next one. Thanks all.